the fun thing with wrestling is a match is an indicative of the whole art form. So how a match is structured actually relates to how the card is structured, which relates how to your organization might be structured, which, you know, it kind of balloons out. Like the best wrestling is best when you're thinking both in the terms of this one match, how it affects your larger platform.
Stay tuned for the show. Poets at War is sponsored by the following.
Hello, I'm Sarah Levesque, Editor-in-Chief of Logo Sophia magazine. I would like to invite you to explore our Pilgrim's Journal of Life, Love, and Literature, both in visual format and in podcast format. Our goal is to help bridge the gaps between different Christian denominations and traditions. Please visit our website at logosophiamag.com to read or listen to stories, articles, poetry, and more, all for free. We look forward to journeying with you.
Today on the show, we have owner and operator of Pele Pro Wrestling, Kyle Hessler, and we talk about all the amazing ways in which pro wrestling can teach us more about writing stories and narratives. Want to know more? Stick with us in the trenches. You've reached Poets at War!
What you been up to since getting back from Fight Laugh Feast?
Let's see. Dealing with some work drama. Getting ready to the show. Our next show is only, I mean, it's kind of, I always call it 3 weeks. Like, I don't really consider the weekend. Like, the weekend's hard to promote on because people are doing other stuff.
Right.
So our show's it's in 3 weekends basically. So first week in November. So doing good, getting ready to, you know, promote that and do all that stuff. So,
Yeah.
But yeah, just been kind of doing life stuff, getting back in the flow of stuff.
Yeah.
So
Family stuff and everything.
Yeah. Did you, just as a side funny thing,
Yeah.
did you catch that? Did you see the little controversy with Matt Walsh?
Yeah.
How stupid. I mean, like, what a clown, but how funny was that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just and the thing is, we got similar stuff from Jason Whitlock at the show. You know, we get similar stuff from all those guys, and it's like, you really don't know what they're doing in Moscow, Idaho, do you?
No, I do think Jason does. I do think just because of the Knox connection, but like, it's just so, like, I listened to that, and I was kind of I was gonna message Gabe, but I was just like, I'm sure he's getting enough of it. But I was like, this proves to me the Daily Wire will not last, because if they're gonna be big time in people, nope, no chance.
Oh yeah.
So.
Well, as far as this all goes, we've already started. I just kind of, cut it where I just kind of cut it where I do. And if you said anything you're worried about, don't worry about it. I got you. But like, yeah, I mean, I just kind of jump in and talk for an hour with a friend, and then, run a thing. What do you call it? Oh yes, nice.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah,
gotta have that.
Well, if we're
your mic's covering it, you gotta throw the other shoulder. There you go.
Yeah. Do you do an intro, or do we just kind of?
I do the intro and post. We just kind of talk, So yeah, I mean, but that's just kind of how I do. It's meant to be a conversation between, artists of different varieties and things, and you're definitely an artist in your own. I wanted to definitely talk about pro wrestling as an art form, especially as a storytelling art form, because I think people don't realize how potent it can really be, mixing aspects of the circus and sports and all these other sorts of things together. But we met at Fight Laugh Feast, but I've known about you for a little while. You're working on a project for Lore. My friends, you just didn't know that.
You just didn't know you knew me.
Right, exactly. I didn't know. I didn't know I knew you, but yeah,
and I didn't know I knew you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, because yeah, go ahead.
Because our friend Adrian, he was referencing you to me, but he didn't say who you were, so I didn't know Joshua this. And then we met. It was pretty quickly that we realized, we put two and two together. But it was just kind of funny that we've technically known each other without knowing each other for a little bit.
It's kind of weird. Adrian was kind of keeping me in his back pocket, so to speak, for this Lord project coming up, among other things. And I'm really excited about what you're doing with that, kind of documenting the that's not a word, but you know what I mean, the entire indie, well, not the entire, but the indie wrestling community from a Christian's perspective, a conservative Christian who's not just your typical altar call wrestling show kind of person either. I can tell just by talking to you. So,
well, it's funny, like years ago, I remember watching, I don't remember how I would have found this, but this was like at a weird point of Netflix where, I mean, I guess they still do this, but excuse me. They had I found some documentary. It wasn't poorly made or anything, but they had a documentary where it was following a guy that was doing evangelism through wrestling. Yeah. And especially in hindsight, if I watched it right now, I know how it ends, but I think I would have been able to call it pretty quickly. The guy ends up leaving his wife, and you could kind of see they didn't do the best job. I don't know how they were trying to edit it, because it wasn't very edited friendly towards him as it goes along. And I just remember watching that, just being like, this is a shame, because this is, I'm a big Peter Hitchens guy. Mm-hmm. I read The Rage Against God, and as soon as I finished it, I read it again. It's one of the few times I've ever done that. And he's got a bit, I always forget the name of the piece of art, but there was a piece of art where it was showing hell, and it was showing the bodies dysmorphed and all this different stuff, showed heaven. I really need to look it up and remember that name, but long story short, he says that picture evangelized him. Now, obviously, he would acknowledge there was a lot of stuff leading up to that moment, but basically that was a seminal point for him in layman's terms. That's when he came to Christ, I guess.
Yeah.
And so I think wrestling could have that same effect.
Oh yeah, for sure.
God uses means.
Mm-hmm.
So
absolutely. I just think it's interesting when they try to manufacture it through wrestling. Because that's actually I've known of a couple communities. I actually ran a site called Christian Wrestling Alliance back in the day, and it was a whole. I basically just anywhere I could find a wrestler who was, I'm a teenager and stuff. Any time I find a wrestler who claims Christianity, I'm putting him in basically a list. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And just kind of just saying, this is what's up. This is who we are. Be praying for these guys, And I tried to have an e-fed in the forum and all the other kinds of stuff. We talked about e-feds when we were in person. But yeah, I mean, it was a good time. But I also have been to some shows. There's one in Georgia that ran for a long time, Ultimate Christian Wrestling, UCW. Yeah. You know about those guys or no?
No, it just sounds.
It sounds right. Yeah.
I mean, it's just one of those things. There's two Christian wrestling federations in Texas that I know of, and they both have great they have great people that work for them.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of one of those funny things where it's the acronyms.
They blur together. Yeah. I'm right there with you. Yeah. But no, Creed was a part of it. Austin Creed. Okay. And AJ Styles for a little while, and Glacier made some appearances, and all those.
He's still going,
guys. Yeah. Oh yeah.
He's still going. Yep.
he never got the credit he deserved, honestly. I think he was way better than a lot of people were saying. He's still mid-card, but good mid-card,
the boys pop for him all the time.
Oh yeah.
He was doing a seminar, and a guy that anyway, I could go on and on about him. It's just kind of weird how that stuff works out. But anyway, but yeah, you're right. I mean, it's just there's tons of little Christian wrestling leagues. And I think, I guess we can kind of just go into my story a little bit here.
Yeah, please do. Talk about whatever, man. I want to hear everything you got for me, So go for it.
I'll work from a middle point, just because we were kind of talking about, and then we can kind of go back to the beginning and then come where we are. Sure.
Yeah.
But I remember I was talking with my Pastor Steve Jeffrey, and he's a good friend. And him and me talk about this pretty regularly. I'd say maybe once every 6 weeks or so, we'll just have a conversation. Sometimes I want to talk content. Sometimes we just talk about the general direction, stuff like that. But one of the first things when he came into our church and he had just moved from England. So we were the first couple he initiated into the church. And then he also was, my son was the first one he baptized. And at some point in that, very important stuff, I introduced this less important thing of wrestling, and he was like, oh, okay, well, this will be interesting. So one of the things that he made me talk about pretty regularly is, if I'm going to sell tickets, you can't pull the rug out from people. You can't all of a sudden be doing an altar call. They didn't pay for that. And that would be pretty, I think they just wouldn't be a good steward.
Yeah.
Now, what I do at all my shows, and you can go to my Twitter page, you can see I've got my entrance music. I use Doug Wilson's Hold Your Peace, which I think works out pretty good. I might switch that up to a really cool version of Psalm 2 I found. But you can watch my entrance. I come out and I'm very explicit. I say, I'm a Christian man. This is what I do. I love honoring Jesus through this. This is all what I'm about. The guys work hard. The boys, not all of them believe in Jesus. That's okay. They're on board with what we're doing. And we're just here to glorify God through pro wrestling and make sure we have a good time. And then I just lead into a prayer where I pray for the health and safety of well-being, that the fans would be entertained, and that God would be glorified through wrestling. And it's like, that's pretty much, other than if I'm working with a guy that's a wrestler, that's about as far as the explicit Christianity goes. It's more of just a stamp. And then everything else is just really good storytelling that flows kind of from that. And then, like, obviously it's, you've been to indie shows. Indie shows are a lot different than your WWEs or something like that. They're very intimate. So a lot of times, like, I know a lot of our fans pretty well. They know a lot of the wrestlers and stuff. So there's a cool dynamic where, like, after the show, they get to engage with these guys, and a lot of kids will want to talk to me, and a lot of adults will want to talk to me. And, I'm obviously going to play it down, but anytime I'm going to talk to them about Christ, because I feel like at that point the show's over. So so it's been rewarding, and there's been a lot of fruit from it. I don't want to start like claiming stuff. Yeah. But there's a guy, his name's Travis. I don't think he would have a problem with saying this. He came to Christ since he met me back in June of last year, and he's worked for me all of this year. And he came to Christ earlier this year. He got baptized, and then he got married. Praise God. Fantastic. And, I haven't had an explicit conversation with him about it, but I mean, I can't imagine that we didn't have it. We did, what I'm doing.
There wasn't something there. You were in the ether. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right. So, and you know what, praise God. Like, I don't need the credit. I'm just saying it's cool to see that start going its way. I think I was telling you this story before. I won't say it by name, but there's a very strong atheistic guy, very liberal. We are diametrically opposed. And yet him and me have a really good relationship, I would say. We had a conversation in May, just being like, because of the Roe v. Wade thing. I said, we just got to kind of hash this out. And we did. It wasn't like anything. He was probably more professional than I was. And I just like working with the guy. He likes working with me. And we were in the middle of a long form story. Well, the next show, so our last show in September, we did a modified bull rope match. You'll like this.
Yeah.
So it's the match, the whole, it was kind of funny.
When you get a chance, including what you're going to say the modification is, explain bull rope match too for the listeners, because a lot of people listening are going to be your Tolkien Lewis guys, not so much the wrestling guys. But you're doing good so far, so I'll try to keep you to go ahead.
I appreciate it. So a normal Texas bull rope is, the guys they have their wrists taped or however, with a bull rope, and then, which is just a rope, and then it has like a cowbell in the middle. And the normal rules is that you're supposed to touch the four corners of the ring. It's a little bit old school. I think it's a little antiquated, a little tired. So we modified the rules where it was actually some, like, you could only win by knockout, which would mean a 10 count, like in boxing, which you don't see a lot of that in wrestling. People, they'll, if both guys go down, it's called a double down, you'll get 1, 2, the ref will do that, but you rarely see a match end that way.
Right.
And it was just a little bit more brutal that. And then the other way was if they had a submission, and their whole feud had started, they had a match in March, and then they came to me afterwards and like, hey, that was really good. Like, we want to, let's run that back. So we laid the seeds for a feud, and the whole thing was about respect and getting a handshake, which the irony was, I didn't think about this till later. It was like, well, we're basically strapping their hands together.
Right.
Kind of
forcing
like
the handshake.
Yeah. So anyway, to go back to what I was saying, the guy in the match, he's strong atheist. And we had talked in May about just, hey, making sure we're on the same page. Like, I don't have any qualms with your worldview. We don't have a contract together. I just like working with you. I think my fans like seeing you, and creatively, I'd like that we can work. And he expressed a similar thing. So we've been working together. And this last show, when they had the bull rope match, because there's no rules, it was a little bit more brutal. So we don't do a lot of blood or chair shots. We reserve them. And this called for it. My wife said she was a little bit uncomfortable, but it was a really good match.
Right.
And it was the heat was just, so the heat means like the crowd reaction, like all that. And so the crowd was just like, the heat was just perfect. They actually didn't start strapped. They kind of brawled around the arena. Anyway, but I was really excited because at the end of the match, I just was like, I had made some suggestions as the booker. I said, hey, what if we did this? Like, don't start the match actually strapped together. Like, we won't ring the bell till you both are strapped. Why don't you guys brawl around the arena? Mm-hmm. And then I said, all three people in the match, we had all agreed that they should get get blood. Mm-hmm. And then I suggested the finish, which to my knowledge has never been done before, because it would never, the situation would have never called for it. But I don't want to get into the nitty gritty of it, but just to tell your fans kind of like where we're going.
Right. In other words, it was getting really brutal, y'all.
Yeah. And the finish, they did my suggestion. I didn't tell them to do it. Right. So I said, hey, what if we did a thing where you use the rope to pull yourself up before the 10 count? Long story short, they ended up doing what I suggested. I didn't tell them to do it. I just made a suggestion. And I told both guys afterwards, I'm like, you guys did everything I suggested. They're like, yeah, because it was good ideas. Mm-hmm. And so for me, coming from a guy that has a very different worldview, and another guy who doesn't, but is a guy on national TV, both these guys had a lot of respect for me to listen to me. And I think that's a sign of fruit. I think that's a sign of creatively, we're all jiving together. Yeah. And they're on board with what we're doing. So
at least respect for, your perspective on things and whatever else. And, storytelling follows from what you believe, very much so. And so it's that's incredible. Just to summarize a couple things for you all who are listening. Obviously a booker is a person who books the matches. It's the person who is working with the wrestlers on the story and what they're trying to do. Not going too much into kayfabe, that sort of a thing, which is a whole other thing to go into, but you can look it up for yourself and find out on the internet.
Kayfabe, who's that?
I know, right? Yeah, you look it up. Kayfabe. Seriously, might start you getting into wrestling and realize that there's a little bit more there than you might initially see. I've always said, and I've said it a couple times on here at various points, but I wanted to get your thoughts on wrestling more than just like this, what you think of when you think of wrestling. You think of your main events, you think of the title, you think of Hulk Hogan, you think of things of like, your basic stuff like that. One of the things that really catches me with wrestling is, Sting was my favorite wrestler growing up, but there's a whole 2 or 3 hour show back in the 90s. I mean, then you still get 2 and 3 hour shows today.
Right.
So they have to fill it with different things. You can't just have the elephants at the circus. You've got to have the clowns, you've got to have the acrobats, you've got to have back in the 90s they had the Daredevil motorcycle in the globe. I don't know if you remember that or not.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. So I want you to get into, if you can, just some of the different flavors of things that have really drawn you to wrestling. You know, I was big into the luchadors in WCW in the 90s, right? The Mexican guys with the crazy Power Rangers type characters, you know, that was really fun and kept me waiting for Sting at the end, right?
Yeah.
So just go ahead and talk about how there's a little something for everyone, the circus aspect of wrestling, so to speak.
I think of it more like, I guess it's because I haven't gone to a lot of circuses, so it's always hard for me.
That's okay.
even though wrestling has its roots in that, for me, it's like wrestling's certainly more like a buffet, like a really good buffet, where it's like you got your little chopped salad stuff, you got your short ribs, your wings, your burgers, all that different stuff, but like a really good one where it's like high end stuff. And you could certainly have low end Golden Corral. Actually,
the Chinese buffet in the corner there, which may or may not be the best thing you've ever had.
I was gonna say, or in fact, most independent wrestling is actually the Golden Corral. But there's a lot of stuff missing. But it's something like that, because it's like when I'm putting a card together. So like for our next show,
explain what a card is real quick.
Yeah, so the card would just be like
the list of matches.
So like you know, a good show will have no more than like 8 or 9 depending on what it is,
how long it is.
Like I've been to WrestleManias where it's like 14-15 matches but it's like a 6-hour show, and that's like your big I mean, I think most people know what WrestleMania is without even knowing what it is. So like the whole structure of a show, when I'm putting it together, you've got to have your balance, because you want to keep the crowd engaged, right? So like if there's somebody, the guy I was mentioning earlier that is a Christian now, Travis, he's coming from out of state. We have a good relationship. We've had it for over a year and a half now, but he was a guy with no rapport in Texas. So when he first came here, my goal is to put him with somebody that can kind of match his abilities, so he won't be overmatched. Like he'll be able to get some moves in. So he's not going with like I think he's like 175, but he's got like a very technical basis. So he looks like a jiu-jitsu guy or something like that. So the first match I had him in was a guy named Mysterious Q, who's a lot bigger than him, but is very agile and can sell. So selling is the act of making it look like you get hurt, right?
Making it look worse than whatever you did get hurt, because it does hurt.
And like we can come back to that, because I actually think selling is like the biggest thing of wrestling. But selling is like how you make everything work. For short little thing, Hulk Hogan is one of the most underrated sellers of all time. Because he would make you think he was beat to pulp, and then when it was time to come back, his comeback always meant more, because you thought he was down. Every Hulk Hogan match was Rocky 1. So Rocky 1.
Pay attention, writers. This is pacing to a T. Like this is the ABCs of pacing, and this is stuff that you can use in your writing too. But go ahead.
Yeah. Well, and actually, I think the fun thing with wrestling is a match is an indicative of the whole art form. So how a match is structured actually relates to how the card is structured, which relates how to your organization might be structured, which, it kind of balloons out. Like the best wrestling is best when you're thinking both in the terms of this one match, how it affects your larger platform. If you just kind of throw it away, you can get away with it, but it's better when you're thinking narrative wise, how you do it together, which is hard because you're balancing, like I might have like 60 matches in a year. So, and that's nothing compared to some companies.
Well, it's
But,
like when you know, some people do this with chapters in novels, but it's less common because you're thinking more of the big total arc, right? So the thing is, in wrestling, you actually have, you know, if you have a 10 match card, that's 10 self-contained stories that have to tell one full story for the night, but also one story within however many shows you do in a year. You know, so you're thinking on in tiers of full complete beginning middle ends, at least, if not, you know, something closer to the hero's journey. So there's but go ahead.
Well, and so going back to the guy I was mentioning, Travis, so I bring him in. So like, I'm not thinking so, you know, here's how I think. I sometimes think, do I just want to put on a good match, or am I doing something with this guy? Or is this guy part of something larger? Okay. So Travis, when he first came in, I was like, okay, we had an arrangement. And so I was like, okay, this guy, we have a good arrangement. This guy wants to work really hard for me. He sees my promotion as a way he can get himself over in the South because he's from the Midwest. I was like, okay, well, let's do that. So I put him with this guy, Mysterious Q, like I was saying, who's very agile, can sell for him. And they had a good match. And then Travis didn't come back until he missed. So he came on I think that was June. And then he didn't come back till March of this year. And then he's been on every show this year. So then this year, I was like, what do I need to do with him? Because I see some ability, but how does he connect with my fans? Right. So a real simple way to do this in wrestling is you put a wrestler with a manager. So you put him with somebody that's going to be ringside with him. Think he's his coach in some ways. Not it's totally not analogous, but it can be. Yeah. So I put him with this guy Nastico, who's our general manager. So in storyline, this guy, he runs the show, and this guy gave him the stamp of approval. So Nastico comes out in their match, tells the referee something, and then the finish is the referee who's in the pocket that, you know, he's being paid off by the owner.
Right.
He does a fast count 1, 2, 3 so that Travis gets the win. Now, what does this do? The crowd is mad at the situation, but they don't like Nastico. They don't like what Nastico does. There's an association. Now Travis is not liked, which is what we wanted to do, because it's easier to get a guy over sometime. In my opinion, it's easier to get a guy over at first as a heel than as a face.
And by over, you mean popular. One way or the other, you know.
And as a face, as a face, we mean baby face, which means the good guy. Heel means the bad guy. Yep. So now we have Travis as a heel, and then over the next few shows, we do stuff with him to kind of keep doing that. Now, I also put him in matches with guys that were like nationally known. We were just kind of waiting. We were waiting for the crowd to get behind him. And then our last show, he wrestles this guy named Mike Bennett, who's a beloved wrestler. Yeah, like, you know, he is.
I know who Mike Bennett is.
He was in the WWE for a little bit. They didn't know what they were doing with him. He's been in a bunch of different stops. He's just a beloved guy. Everyone loves him. He does a bunch of anyway, he's just a likable guy. So Mike comes in, he's wrestling Travis. So you have Travis walk out first. Crowd's booing because he's with his manager, who's the bad guy. And then you've got Mike Bennett comes out, gets the cheer. And then Mike goes to shake his hand, smacked away by Travis, right? Instant. We know the divide. Good guy, bad guy. And then the match goes on. It's very competitive. It's really good. And then Travis's manager tosses him a weapon, like where everyone can see it. And Travis tosses it back. I don't want to win that way. Now we've planted the seeds. Travis ends up losing, but now we've planted the seeds that, wait a second, this guy Travis, we think he's a bad guy.
He's not as bad as you think we are.
He's not as bad as you think. So by the time, and I've already worked it out with now he's involved with like a bigger story. So we went from when he debuted, we're just like, what am I doing with him? I got to get him over. And then next thing you know, We got him in we've got a little story going with them. And now we've included him in a bigger story. And now we've got a bigger story, which actually includes him becoming a good guy, which will be like when that happens, it'll be like a big, switcheroo.
Right. Yeah, totally.
So.
Yeah. So with your personal story, you want to get into kind of how you got into it and where your love for this came from. And, we talked a little bit about the story. You try to weave that in some more if you can, but I want to hear about you and tell the people about you.
Yeah. So, I grew up watching wrestling. I got introduced to it. The first real memories I have is probably like 2003, 2004. So like post Attitude Era, Steve Austin, The Rock were pretty much gone at that point. The first guy I really gravitated towards was like John Cena. Mm-hmm. And so, but I know I watched it before that. It's just, that's when I started, that's when
attention.
Yeah. So, at some point between, I think it was because of Brock Lesnar becoming an MMA fighter, I got into, I pro wrestling got me into amateur wrestling. So I did that in like grade school and high school. And then when Brock did MMA, I was like, I want to try that. So then I got into that, became a professional fighter. I've had a couple professional fights, got to do some real cool stuff with that. It never really left my love of pro wrestling, but just kind of went into this world of cage fighting. And about 6 or 7 years ago, stopped doing that after a couple losses. And then about 3 years ago, 2.5, 3 years ago, I don't want to get into this part of the story too much, but
that's okay.
I basically got into a situation where it's like, I found out how easy it was to do a wrestling show. Mm-hmm. And so this is like, it started before COVID. We were planning it. And then when COVID happened, we kind of shut down. But we ended up doing a 2-day show in August of 2020. And I should have grabbed it. I actually was just given a book that talked about wrestling during COVID. I'll have to send it to you.
Yeah.
And there's a section about me in it.
Oh, wow.
He got some things a little wrong because he wasn't at the show. It was just from an interview. But I will say a little side note that I was really proud of. He was very explicit about my Christianity. Mm-hmm. So I was like, okay, well, I'll take that.
You made some noise for showing up.
Correct. But yeah, long story short, so we did this 2-day wrestling show. And, at the time, there was no live wrestling. So we kind of took a shot. In Texas, you don't need any license. You can just do wrestling. Mm-hmm. So I found out it's pretty easy. All you got to do is like you got to get the contact info for these wrestlers. And thankfully, for better or for worse, because of COVID, a lot of these guys were accepting messages from anyone.
Right.
And so we booked a really stacked card. We had like Jake the Snake, Nick Aldis, Lance, oh my gosh.
Lance Storm? I don't know.
No. Oh my gosh, he's on AEW. I'm just Lance Archer.
Archer. Okay, yeah.
Just couldn't break. So Lance Archer, Brian Cage.
Wow.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And if I show you the whole card, it was like,
yeah,
this is only the top.
Yeah. These are all TV guys, people, just so you know.
Yep.
These are, this isn't like low level stuff. Go ahead.
I think in the trailer, I think we said over 40 competitors.
Wow.
So, and I have a photo, like I got to hold the NWA championship, which is like for your audience, that's the most historic championship. It's not the most prestigious anymore, but that's the like longest running lineage title.
It's had some breaks in the chain, but yeah, it's a very prestigious title. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we did that weekend, and basically we lost everything. We took a shot. We didn't really know how to do a wrestling show, and we didn't know how to promote. We thought if we just book a bunch of names, it'll all figure itself out. But while doing that,
yeah,
pretty much. And it kind of happened, but like, it just, it was tough. The trick was I just shouldn't have made it so big. And I probably could have done, should have done a few other things that probably would have worked out a little bit better. But I walked away from that. Like there was one, because it was just like a pop-up event. So like we didn't have any storylines. We didn't really have anything we could do. We had to come up with some like, okay, how do we keep people's interest? So it was a 2-day show. So like the two ideas I had was, why don't we do like a battle royale where the winner gets a shot at Nick Aldis on night 2? Pretty straightforward, nothing super complicated. As a side note, I have zero problem saying it now because it's really funny to me now.
Yeah.
The two things I cannot believe no one ever called us out for, and we didn't get any crap for, was we did a 30-man battle royale and during COVID. And then we also did a 10-man tag during COVID.
Love it.
And it's just like, yeah. And I think the way we got away with the battle royale was we did like, I mean, we did ask everyone to get like the blood test and all that. But like the part that was really funny was the battle royale. I just remember we were like, why don't we make it safe? We'll just have 5 guys come in at a time. So the idea was there were never going to be more than 10 people at the ring at once. But I mean, like that doesn't make it any safer.
No.
Like, I mean, per COVID stuff,
right. Yeah.
Just
none of it makes it any safer, but yeah.
Yeah. So that was one thing I came up with. And then the second thing was we did this 10-man style match where it was 5 guys versus 5 guys. And we're needing storylines to carry over. So I proposed, why don't we do something where the one team has their last 2 guys get in a tiff, where one of the guys walks out, then it's 2-on-1. The one guy comes back, has to beat the other guys, but he does. And then the next night, the guy that walked out on him, they have a match.
Okay.
So not that in terms
basic,
of wrestling,
simple story.
Yeah. But like it worked. We had some problems because we didn't have a microphone because I didn't know any better. Well, actually, to be fair, we thought the venue was like, yeah, we have microphones. It was an ice rink arena. So it didn't extend to the middle of the court. So it was kind of frustrating. Anyway, but I just like, when that all happened, I was like, I don't want to stop doing this. So I talked to my wife and I said, like, okay, what if we do it like this? We'll set a budget. We'll do it like, blah, 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 blah. I found a brewery in Arlington that was like, yeah, what about a Thursday night show? It'll help their business. And they were like, yeah, that sounds great. So we did like a really small scale show. And then it was like, okay, I think I know what I'm doing. And then we kind of like, we did like a 1-night tournament for our title. Not this one. This wasn't the original belt, but any opportunity to show this belt.
Of course.
We'll have to talk about it in a second because it's got a little hidden message in it that's really cool.
Is it Aslan?
So it kind of is.
Lion of Judah.
So I'll just show you real quick. So if you look closely, I don't know if you can see it. It's got the 5 solas.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. Now I had to get it made twice because this piece the guy didn't build it right. But it's sola, sola scripta, sola di gratia, sola Christos, sola fide, and sola gratio. And it's just like everyone that sees it is like, oh, that looks really cool. And then when they get close, they're like, what does that mean? And it's like, great, let's talk.
Exactly. I love it. Yeah. I love it.
So
Andrew got the lion, which is Christian Andrew. But yeah.
Well, and it's to me, it's actually just a really cool looking.
It is.
A lot of people really like it. So, so we did the first show, and again, it was just like the first. So this is last year. So we did a show in January. We did a show in February. We broke until June, and I think by June, I was like, okay, I think I know what I'm doing. Like I know, like a lot of the stuff I want to eventually get to the point where we're successful is like, I want to hand off this stuff. Somebody that handles the venue, that handles the seat assignments,
right,
and this kind of stuff, the production. So I can focus on the writing and the storyline stuff. But by my 4th or 5th show, I was like, okay, I feel like I know what I'm doing. Now, I also went out of my way to go to other people's shows both in Texas and then in Chicago, Vegas. I went to other people's shows and just said like, hey, can I help in any way? I just need to get reps.
Tricks of the trade.
Yeah. So like a lot of it's just like stuff like, like marking, like putting an X where you may need like a position, or like making sure a camera knows where it's at, or making sure, whatever, just like little stuff like that, lighting stuff. And I still don't know all of it, but like, I feel like show days, I'm not that stressed anymore. I used to have to be stressed because I'm like, like I'm running back and around. And what I really want to sit down and work with is talk with the wrestlers about their matches. And so we did a show in January, and then February was a lot of fun. That was the infamous snow day. The last year we had that giant snow ice storm in Texas.
Yeah.
This was on the eve of that show.
Oh boy.
And like all other shows canceled. And I was like, hell no, I'm not.
We're going to get this in. That's fine.
Well, what happened was I had, I don't know if you know who this is, but I had Psycho Clown coming in.
Okay. I kind of do, but yeah.
So he's like, he's like a huge name in Mexico. And so a bunch of things happened that allowed him to be on our show. And he was in our main event. He challenged for our championship. And so I was like, he's already going to be here. I'm not canceling the show.
Right.
And the show ended up going, I think, really well. And then it was like, again, it was just like learning. So like in that match, so what we did was, my first champion was a guy named Sam Adonis, and he had a manager. So he's a 6'4" blonde guy, bad guy. And then he's got this guy, MK Bandit, who's a manager. So they're doing this match with Psycho Clown for this championship. And they're telling me in the back, like, this is what we want to do. We have to protect Psycho Clown. So we need to do a finish. So we need to protect Psycho Clown, which means either he's a big name and can't lose.
Right. You have to protect his reputation. Right.
Yeah.
That's
so
one.
So imagine Matthew McConaughey showing up in like a YouTube short.
Right.
I mean, I guess that's not outlandish, but I'm saying something like, how about a better example? Matthew McConaughey showing up on a Sci-Fi Network TV show.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you just can't, it's just not how it works. Now, granted, he was a very gracious guy, so he didn't have a problem losing, but we just had to do some sort of thing where it kind of protected him a little bit.
Yeah.
So we came up with a finish where, so at the time, I'm the owner as well as the on-screen owner. So I'm out in front of the crowd. I'm a character at this point.
Right.
And so we do a thing where we announce the matches, no disqualifications, which means they can do whatever they want. And so
basically pinfall or submission and nothing else.
Yeah. So first problem, and this is all stuff like, I'm with guys that are literally world traveled. I'm not saying I know better than them, but it's like one of those things like, as you learn, it's like, oh, I wouldn't have done this.
Right.
So first problem, what they wanted me to do was, as the owner, I need to throw MK Bandit out. So he's going to do something where he's like, he grabs the leg or he does this. And then, hey, you get out of here. You're fired.
Right.
Well, okay. In story, that doesn't really make any sense because you said it's no disqualification.
Yeah.
Okay. So problem number one. Problem number two was the finish was going to be a referee gets bumped, which means the referee gets like hit with something by accident or whatever. And then the referee goes down and then he has to be helped to the back. And then here comes the second referee. Okay. No problems with that. So the second referee comes out. And then the finish involved, they climbed the top rope and they do a crazy move where one guy is effectively doing a backflip, holding the other guy, and the other guy does a front flip.
Spanish fly.
So they go through a door, not a table, a door. I've learned that doors are cheaper than tables.
There you go.
Okay. So they go through this door, and both guys are so exhausted at this point that they can't pin each other, right? They're too tired. So then here comes MK Bandit through the curtain again, and he starts hitting the other referee, and the other referee's now knocked out. He takes a bump. And then Psycho Clown, now he's working to his feet. He's up to his feet, and he's like, blah, 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 blah. And then MK Bandit takes off his shirt. He's got a referee uniform on.
Nice.
Okay. Problem number 2, biggest problem. I'm still at ringside.
Right.
I'm still there.
Right.
And I told them afterwards, I was like, I know it doesn't probably matter, but just like creatively, I should have, in that moment, before he got to his feet, I should have climbed onto the ropes and said, deck me. You need to pop me. Right. So I'm out of commission. So anyway, the finish was then Sam low blows. So he hits
him low.
Hits him low. And then 1, 2, 3. So, and that was it. So I say all that. That's a long-winded story of saying like, now I wouldn't make that same mistake. Now I've made other mistakes, but there's mistakes that it's like, you have to take your creative ability from reading, from watching, from whatever. I've got to take all this creative stuff that I've learned over decades of my life and now apply it into wrestling.
Right.
And so, and you got to learn the art of wrestling, right? So it's like, if you want to do a play, you can't tell a play like you tell a musical, or you can't tell a musical like you tell an opera
or a film or anything. Yeah.
Exactly. One of the best examples of this, I about a few years ago, a friend of mine was in a production of a few good men.
Okay.
And I've seen a few times where it's like the movie is adapted for the play. I actually forget which the order.
I don't remember. Yeah.
But another example I saw, which was better because I know it wasn't a play first, was Network.
Okay.
You ever see, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. So Network was definitely a movie, and we were in New York and we saw Bryan Cranston was starring in Network. So we're like, oh, let's just go see that. Now, I didn't actually care for the play, but I just want to say the adaptation was really cool, but it was really unique because they had to do all these bend the lines to make a movie fit to a play. Whereas I think a play to a movie is much easier, but obviously there's kinks and adjustments. But this is all how you have to think about wrestling. So all right, stop me if I'm going.
No, go ahead. You're good.
So I just finished the second book in the the Ransom trilogy.
Okay.
You're back. You're back. Say it.
See, you say you're going off the rails. You're actually going back onto the rails with a lot of these people listening. So go ahead. Yeah, with the Space Trilogy, the C.S. Lewis Space Trilogy, Ransom
Trilogy.
Yeah.
Palalandra, I can't say it. Paralandra. I cannot get it. Anyway, so we actually listened to Out of the Silent Planet up onto Knoxville, and then we started the second one on their way back. And I just
did audiobook? Good.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because that one is really hard in reading because it's all dialogue.
Yeah.
But yeah, go ahead.
So I'm listening to this and I'm like, what are some themes? Like I'm trying to sit here and I'm going like, well, I love what Lewis is doing in those books. How can I he's basically taking biblical things and applying them in his story.
In sci-fi.
I'm sitting here like, okay, how can I do similar things with wrestling?
Right.
I don't quite know yet. I can get some themes down. I can get some respect and honor and stuff like that.
Innocence.
I really have.
Yeah.
But I have not got to the point of being able to, I'm talking these big philosophical things of like, how do you make a movie into a play?
Right.
But I haven't cracked that code.
Right.
But as far as I know, I'm the only one. I'm not going to say I'm the only guy trying. I know I'm probably the only Reformed Christian trying, but I know that there's other people because I watch their products. I watch the other wrestling stuff because I got to learn from other people. But I watch them and I'm like, their storytelling is remarkable, but they're not basing it in what I would call a Judaic Christian ethos. So
Right.
I'm trying to figure out how to do that kind of same thing. So I kind of gave you half my story. We can come back to the other half, but
it's okay. Yeah, let me just state for people, pro wrestling, everyone kind of thinks of it as like WWE, or they're just the basics of what they've seen on TV over the years, and there's so many other flavors out there. And not just regional flavors and not just national flavors, like Mexico versus the United States, etc. Everyone kind of knows Mexican wrestling is different, but like Chikara, which we talked about very briefly, those guys in Pennsylvania, it's spelled Chikara, by the way, for those who want to look it up. They do crazy over the top comic book characters that are just basically having really dramatic storylines at times, but also they play everything straight that needs to be played straight and just suck you into their world, and it's just a whole entirely different world than what you expect. Go ahead.
You and I were talking about like my all-time favorite spot, which so spot would be like a scene, but like a
moment
very
in the match.
Yeah. So it could either be a move or it could be something that happens or whatever. But like the spot that like you and me talked about, it's just, you can find it online. It's fantastic. It was Chuck Taylor versus the War Ants. I looked it up after we talked about it. I looked it up just to make sure. But basically the spot is this guy, Chuck Taylor, it was a 6-man match. So there was three guys, and it was Chuck Taylor, I forget the other guys, versus this team that all dressed in ant costumes. And it sounds ridiculous, but it looked pretty cool.
You guys got a picture. This is like Power Rangers as pro wrestling. Okay.
Yes, correct.
You have to suspend a lot of disbelief. Go ahead.
So the guy, Chuck Taylor, he does this spot because, again, their whole thing is it's comedy. So they don't take themselves too serious. He pretends to take a grenade and he does it in slow motion. Well, the whole thing, everybody sells it. So
the referee,
so when we say sell, going back to what we were talking about earlier, usually we're talking about the opponent, but like a really good company will have everybody selling. So the referee will be doing, like, for example, if like two big guys fall down at the same time, usually a good ref will know to like stumble backwards because it's like, oh my gosh, the impact. So this guy does this slow motion grenade. The commentators start going, and he takes the grenade. And then the ref is slow-mo. Everybody's slow-mo. And it sounds ridiculous, but
it is. It's wonderful.
But it's so good. It's so funny. And so
it's almost like Looney Tunes, how you can have someone who's totally like believing and playing Emperor has no clothes, basically, and it's like Bugs Bunny pulling one over on Elmer Fudd has an invisible gun or something. It's that kind of a thing. So
but that's what makes wrestling. I think it can sometimes get. I think when that stuff is a little overexposed,
yes,
meaning. To compare to it, I guess I can say some of this stuff because this probably won't get out to the wrestling communities. But like, I'm not. So there's a company called AEW, and I went to a bunch of their. Yep, they're on national TV. They're the second biggest. They're really the only people to ever challenge the WWE, and they're doing pretty decent for themselves. But I went to a bunch of their first shows. I like what they do, but it's gotten hard for me to watch because they overexpose themselves. So in my opinion, they are the equivalent of not just the Marvel movies, they're like the Marvel TV shows.
Right.
So what we mean is you've kind of oversaturated this whole theme of like superheroes and stuff like that. And you're not doing anything original. I mean, you're saying you're doing original stuff with it, but you're really not. Right. So like for me, the last Marvel movie, like I was like really sold on, that wasn't just like part of the Avengers stuff, was the Thor Ragnarok, because it just was so different. It had it had a different bend, it had different beats, it was funny, It was comical.
It leaned into the glory of the Norse god, like the other ones hadn't really before, in the goofiness of it. Immigrant song.
Yep. So like my point is, like with wrestling, it's the same kind of thing as that. Like if you don't protect your art form, you end up with She-Hulk.
Yeah. Yep.
So that's kind of my 2 cents with that. And so, we like, you and me both like Chikara, but that's like going back to like the buffet thing. That might be like the cheesecake on the end of the line.
Right.
You're not going to make a plate of that.
And you're not going to have the grenade spot in the main event, even at Chikara.
Right.
You know? So yeah, it's one of those things where, they would have your goofy stuff like that. They had a group called Los Ice Creams who were a tag team. They still have them. And there's a really brutal thing that some people have done in wrestling. And yes, some of you will really cringe, where they throw thumbtacks on the floor and then throw a guy with thumbtacks. And yes, they really do it. And yes, it really hurts. But the point is that instead of thumbtacks, Los Ice Cream spread sprinkles on the mat. So there you go. But that's the comedy act, like you said. It's the cheesecake, it's the little appetizer kind of thing before you get your main course. And the main course in Chikara is almost always like, what will the fate of the entire organization be when the leader of such and such has to deal with this occult bad guy who's going to use magic to win his match? Like it's a lot more serious, but it's also still just crazy and bonkers and off the walls, which is kind of their brand. So
well, and it's a balance thing. Like I am not, so there's a company called GCW, which if we ever like, that's a whole, if you ever bring me back, that's its own separate, like, you want to know where culture's at, watch a GCW show and you'll be like, oh, that's right, we're depraved. Right. But that being said, I've been captivated by stuff they do, including they had a man versus a woman hardcore match with a guy named Effie. You know who Effie is?
No.
Okay. He's a very explicitly homosexual guy.
Okay.
Now I will say, I like the guy. I personally like him a lot.
Right.
But he's got his gimmick.
Right.
But it was detestable. I mean, it was just like they're hitting the girl like with the chair shots and stuff like that. But I actually overheard part of the finish, and I was still captivated by how they pulled it all off because they were telling a good story. Right. I hated the story, but it was a good story.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. They executed it well. Yeah.
But I'll say this, like you we're talking about like the different beats of, shows and stuff. So I haven't done a lot of comedy stuff. I'd like to, but it's
not your brand yet. You can work that in later, but yeah,
you gotta find the right people.
Right.
I mean, that's the thing too, is like comedy wrestling is like actually pretty hard to do. But like, there was famous GCW match where I forget how they even set it up, but it was like the whole bit was they rigged a bunch of stuff where it was actually just the referee was the match. So it was two invisible guys.
Oh, and nice.
You've never seen this?
I think I have. I think I have seen this.
You have to watch it.
Yeah, I think I have seen this.
It's a great example of like where, we were talking about these Shikar matches. It's kind of like in that where it's like, okay, here's a unique form of this art form. And what is pro wrestling? I actually think that match kind of says what pro wrestling is. It's all about that selling, because the referee is the one that makes he's like, oh my God, don't do that. Don't do that. And the crowd, which is another element we haven't really talked about, the crowd and selling is what makes wrestling.
Yes.
Okay. And, there's a lot more that goes into that, but like the crowd was just hot, which means, they're just into it. So they were just like, they were willing to go with the comedic nature of it all. And they did a good job. Like, honestly, if you watch it, I think it's stupid. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But like, if you can just take a second and kind of like appreciate for what it is, it's really well done. So that's kind of the whole thing, on the buffet line, there's all these different things, but when wrestling's its best, you have two bigger than life kind of figures, and you have one that you have sympathy for, and you have anger towards. And usually it's best when that anger is something that's relatable. So like, I really liked in the 80s, you go back and you watch like Ric Flair. Ric Flair was doing the whole, It was Ric Flair, Dusty Rhodes. Ric Flair was the wheeling and dealing, riding in the limousine guy. He was the world champion, wore the $50,000 suits, got all the ladies, had all the cool jocks with him, this whole thing.
And the thing with that is he wasn't always that. He was actually a good guy before, and he's resorted to cheating to keep his own, the whole entire limousine riding thing up. And I think that's why people hated him the most, is because they cheered him at one point. A lot of people forget that.
You're absolutely right. And think about it like this. It's like watching politics. Like it's like you see what a politician that's dipping into the coffer, you see it, like it's right in front of me. It makes you that much more angry because you know that they know, and so it's the worst kind of heat in wrestling, in my opinion, is cheap stuff. It's unrelated. If you just say like your sports team sucks, that has its spot, but it doesn't really work unless the character builds into it. You know what I mean? And so so you have Ric Flair, this guy, and then who's his opponent? Dusty Rhodes. Big fat guy. I mean, like fat, he's an athlete, but I mean he looked like
he's a chunky athlete. He
was a chunky athlete. He was he's big, but he was an everyday kind of looking guy, and he was the thumb of a plumber. So he's the son of a plumber, right? That's his old gimmick. And he was the American Dream. That was his name. It's print the money. That's a great feud because you have a super relatable guy versus a hateable enemy, right? And now you get to tell your stories, and you get to do different things within what leads to a match. So your feuds will be, what leads to the match, and then in the match, well, what kind of story are you going to tell? Like, are they going to do something where the bad guys the week before attack Dusty's leg? Oh no, Dusty's not going to make it to the match. He's on crutches. No, brother. I got to take this match. Brother. And then he comes to the match. He's limping, and Ric Flair's constantly attacking that leg. But now Dusty's got to overcome. He's got to overcome that leg injury, and he does, and he wins the championship. And that's like the most basic way of telling a wrestling story. And I'm, what I want to do is just figure out how to do that, because I think it's a laudable art form.
Right.
How do you do that? And now add Christianity into it,
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap here, but I just wanted to mention one or two more small things. Guys, pro wrestling is a perpetual Rocky movie. If you've ever watched the Rocky movies, you basically just pick your person or your couple people that you really like and follow their story. Honestly, check out Kyle's promotion. I can't remember how to pronounce it, but go ahead.
Pele Pro, which Pele is the Greek word that you find in Ephesians 5, for we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but the air of the principalities of darkness. Wrestling.
So spell it so people can find it.
If you do Pale Pro, it's got the little dash mark, but if you just do Pale Pro, it'll always come up on Google.
PALE, not PAIL, right?
Yep, correct. Yep.
PALE. So there you go. As far as that goes, check it out and check out some other things. AEW is not a terrible place to start if you want something a little bit more serious. If you want something really funny, check out Chikara. You can just find all kinds of old videos on YouTube. They're really, really fun and wacky and weird. And I just really want to commend it to you guys, because this is something that can really help anyone with their storytelling, because pro wrestling has to both stretch storytelling in ways that it's not normally stretched and boil it down to its simplest elements at the same time. It's kind of stretching in both directions, and I've always admired it for that reason. There are two things I'm going to mention to you after I close here, but is there anything else you want to plug before I close the show part?
Yeah, definitely give us a follow. I mean, if anyone lives in Texas, come to one of our shows. We live stream the shows. I can't say the quality is where I want it right now. But if you really want to check out what I'm trying to do, at least as this overall project, there's me, the person, then there's me, the company. If you want to kind of follow with what I'm doing as as a Christian in this world, check out our documentary on lore called Wrestling With. We've got a teaser trailer, and we've actually got I think it's like a 15-minute episode that Darren Doan directed and produced that we did in a show in Vegas.
We've had him on the podcast before.
Oh, really? Okay,
yes.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Just can I briefly kind of explain?
Yeah,
because we didn't
do what you want to talk about, man. We're good.
Okay, so wrestling, there's 2 projects we're trying to do on lore. One I can't really talk about because we're not there yet, but they're both wrestling related. But the one that's already up, that as soon as they're accepting funding, I've already got 2 seasons ready to go. I just got to get them edited by Adrian. Wrestling With is a documentary series following the wrestlers. So like, as much as I can explain some of this stuff, they're going to explain it even better. So Wrestling With, the first season will follow my friend Chandler Hopkins, who's my current champion. And so it's really interesting stuff. Really excited where that's going. And so check out Wrestling With, like I said, 15-minute trailer. It's awesome to watch. So
I'll try to make sure I get that linked for you. So
appreciate it
in the show notes description, wherever people get it. So with that said, everybody, make sure you check out some wrestling. Be your family's bard. Do not turn to the right or to the left, and the Lord will be with you wherever you go. We'll see you next time in the trenches with the belt on Poets at War.
Yeah. Poets at War, man.
God of songs said